think this is really worth looking at. I got a bunch of Bible for it. B27 says, the third commandment the only one, meaning of the 10, that has a ceremonial law component that is fulfilled so that it is no longer necessary for Christian observance. So the ceremonial law component concept is a way of saying that in the Old Testament, in the laws and prescriptions and statutes, you see kind of three edges to it. One is strict morality. This is good, this is evil. One is social control. That is, there's a year of Jubilee every 7 years and you get your money back. One is ceremonial. That is, there's a worship and liturgical life that the Old Covenant prescribes. It requires of you. Now, this is one of these Lutheran dogmatic things that we do, right? And so we have these theories and now we're going to apply them to the text. And I'm not saying that this threefold way of looking at the law is wrong. I'm saying it's maybe a little simplistic, honestly. Like, well, that one's ceremonial and that one's moral and that one's social. It's like, they're all wise. So the real question is, not to me, has the Sabbath been abrogated? It's what was the purpose of the Sabbath and how does that purpose remain? All right. Exodus chapter 20, where the 10 commandments are given. I mean, if you're going to talk ceremonial law, I mean, how about don't make for yourself a carved image of any likeness, right? So what kind of law is that? Is it ceremonial? Is it social? Is it moral? Now, and given that for Lutherans, we think that that's part of you shall have no other gods. So we're like, well, it's a command then. It's a moral law to have no other gods. But how are they to have no other gods? Not by not making images. And to this day, you can walk into the Reformed churches that think this is the second commandment, and you can find out they don't have any carved images, although you go home and they're all watching TV. They all got mirrors on the wall. I'm just like, guys, me don't think amiss what you think amiss. So my point with that is just to say, when you start saying moral, ceremonial, too narrowly, you kind of miss the boat a little bit if you're not careful. And this is going to be especially true with the Sabbath, because I will contend that the Sabbath day is a moral reality that is the need to be justified by faith alone. I'm going to prove that because that's what Hebrews 4 says. Okay, but first, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. There's this other whole level here. It's really cool. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. Okay, so is there wisdom in taking a day off? You could look at it that way. That's not even where I'm going, but that's there. You nor your son nor your daughter nor any male servant or female servant nor your cattle, nor your stranger within your gates, because in 6 days Jesus made the heavens and the earth. Wait, I thought it was like millions of years. I thought that Genesis was like just a story about how things mean stuff, and then up until the flood. And then the flood didn't happen, but after that, it becomes a history. And so from that point on, it's history. But now in the history, they're insisting that Jesus made the earth in 6 days, the sea and all that is in that, and that he rested on the seventh day. And that's why you should have a seventh day, is because of created order. So the whole point about having and remembering the Sabbath day is to acknowledge God made the earth. I mean, I think that's stunning. And given the fact that they're going to repeat it in Exodus chapter 31, am I in 31? Yeah, Exodus 31, where the Lord spoke to Moses saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death, for whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is a Sabbath of rest, holy to Jesus. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Therefore, the sons of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout all their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign, again, the existence of Saturday is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days, sign of what? That in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, and the seventh day he rested. Okay, so it's a sign of the created order. You could even just look at it this way. Do we keep the Sabbath by having a 7-day week? Everybody does. Okay? You're like, but he says you got to be put to death if you don't rest on the Sabbath. Okay. So what do? Do I say that's ceremonial law so I don't have to pay attention to it? That's a really nice argument. But what I'd rather do is go to Hebrews chapter 4, where he says that rest is actually faith in Jesus. That the real rest isn't me not working in terms of my cow. The real rest is me not working in terms of my justification. Chapter 4, verse 3. We who have believed... For we who have believed do enter that rest. As he said, I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. So this is quoting him saying that the unbelieving Hebrews at the time would not enter his rest, meaning the land. But we have. We have. He's not saying, we have entered that rest, and then he said we won't. No, he said that they would not, but we have. Although the works were finished from the foundation of the world, right? God's done working in this kind of creation way, aside from the new creation. For he has spoken in a certain place of the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again, in this place, they shall not enter my rest. So he's making the connection that the rest he was talking about when he said they shall not enter my rest is the rest of the Sabbath. What the Sabbath really means. All right. Since therefore, verse 6, it remains that some must enter it, and that those to whom it was first preached did not enter because of disobedience. Again, he designates a certain day, saying in David, today. Oh, wait, so the Sabbath is every day then, right? Yes. As Luther's point in the Large Catechism on the third commandment, which is that every day is hallowed by the word of God in prayer, and that's what a true Sabbath is. So he designates a certain day in David, saying, today, after such a long time as it has been said, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. So what does it mean to keep the Sabbath? To hear God's voice today. That's not a ceremonial law. That's not something that's been abrogated. Has it been fulfilled by Jesus doing it perfectly in terms of Saturday rest? Yes, it has. Absolutely. But it's also that Saturday rest that he had was just a symbol and an image of what was to come. And it has not been, it didn't not exist. It wasn't like this wasn't the real meaning all along. That was the shadow cast by this meaning. So it says, verse 8, if Joshua had given them rest, then he would have afterward not have spoken of another day. So, right, entering the promised land wasn't sufficient. That wasn't actually what it was about, right? That was a type. It was a picture. There remains, therefore, a rest for the people of God, for he who has entered God's rest, has also ceased from his works, as God has ceased from his. That is justification, right? You no longer need to please God with atonement. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. Right. So if you're, which ironically, to insist on keeping the Sabbath would be to be disobedient to the Sabbath, given what this text says. Which notice it doesn't mention ceremonial law. There's nothing there about ceremonial law. There's only the answer that the rest it's talking about is faith in the saving acts of God, which have been completed in Jesus as the fulfillment of the rest for you. So, what do you do about Saturday? Well, you know what? It's not a bad idea to take some time off. Like I said, there's wisdom there. And to remember that, in fact, this seventh day exists because that's the created order, and to devote your heart to believing the creation really exists as something God made, that's there too. Yeah. And then to take from that the idea that what really hallows the worship day, the eighth day, the day we come to worship at church, is the word of God. Well, then to have that present every day is to make every day a Sabbath. Goes the other way. It's not just on the Sabbath. On every day, rest from your attempt to work for salvation. Every day. You're in grace now. Right? And then Saturday can just be a day of rejoicing. And the Lord's Day can be a day of rejoicing. Acts chapter 2 points out that after the resurrection, they continually, with one accord, were in the temple and breaking bread from house to house daily. They ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God daily. Those are being saved. So right after the day of Pentecost, they are meeting every day to sanctify the day. But eventually, Acts 20, verse 7, now on the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread, eventually you have this day of resurrection starting to replace the worship life of the church, which initially had been stuck in the synagogue on Saturdays. So that by the time you get to Revelation, John says in chapter 1, verse 10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And so in the church, Sunday, the day of resurrection, has become an even greater Sabbath, but not as though it were the only day you get the word of God, not as though it were the only day you believe in God and trust in his promises for you, but as a day where we come together to be fed this promise. But do you see how it's not shrinking? The old commandment was too small. You only would rest from your works and trust in God on Saturday. And now it's every day. You are free. Like the best case scenario for this as like a Christian practice is like Sunday afternoon, like just take it easy, you know, take it easy together, right? That's the wisdom that's in this. The theology, again, is every day the Word of God sanctifies you. And the Old Testament theology also is, look, God made this week. He made it. The time, the type of time, the 7 days. Everybody's got 7 days. Everybody.